All right, what else can I tell you in order to avoid talking about politics? So, the reason this came to me is primarily watching the Democratic Party, and during this latest war in Israel between Israel and Hamas, and what's become evident, and has become evident for years now, but it's become, I think it was stark during this conflict, is how far to the left the Democratic activists are, even as compared to their congressional representatives or to the President of the United States from their own party. So you have Biden, who's kind of a traditional Democrat. He doesn't really stand for much. He's a moderate, a centrist, a middle-of-the-roader, a compromiser, a nothing in many respects. And he basically holds kind of traditional Democratic views. So when a crisis happens in Israel, generally he's going to be supportive of Israel. Not too much, but generally so, just as, every Democratic president, like Clinton has been in the past. Even Jimmy Carter. Not over the top, but just when push comes to shove, Biden, during this last little war, kept saying Israel has a right to defend itself. Didn't put really a lot of pressure on Israel to have a ceasefire until like 11 days in, and then it wasn't a really big push. And I think generally on issues of race, on issues of cultural war, on issues of the economy, Biden traditionally has been very much a middle-of-the-roader. I mean, Obama took him as vice president because he represented the center, and Obama was afraid that he was too associated in people's minds with the far left. So he was the moderating force. But almost all of the Democrats in the House of Representatives and even in the Senate were way to the left of Biden on the Israel issue. They came out and condemned Israel, took a pretty strong pro-Palestinian stance, and it wasn't even congressional leaders. It's the activists, the BLM activists, the Silicon Valley activists. I don't know if you saw this. 1,000 Apple employees wrote a letter to the CEO demanding that Tim Cook take a stand on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Assuming on the Palestinian side, right? And now 1,000 is less than 1%, right? Because there are 150,000 employees at Apple. So 1,000 is not that impressive. But they're the vocal 1,000. The activists. I did a show a few weeks ago about the fact that at the extremes, that's where you get the activism. That's where you get the activists. That's where you get the loud voices. That's where you get the people who are engaged. That's where you get all the nonsense in Silicon Valley. It's not most employees in Silicon Valley are nutty woke. No, it's the 1,000 at Apple. But that 1,000 are the ones who make the noise. They're the ones who get engaged. They're the ones who write the letters. They're the ones who put pressure. They're the ones who pound the desk. They're the passionate ones. And indeed, in that sense, Democratic activists are far more active than the Republican activists, and Democratic activists are far more numerous than Republican activists. So the activists, the politicians, I think, because of the activists, the intellectuals, the Democratic intellectuals, the intellectuals on the left, have all moved away from the center in dramatic fashion, both on Middle East issues, on race issues with Black Lives Matter, on economic issues with MMT, Medicare for All, and a whole slew of government interventions, dramatic expansion of the welfare state, and massive expansion of central planning. Again, way away from the Biden, even way to the left of Obama, certainly left of Clinton, and past Democrats. And of course, this is all completely predictable. This is all completely predictable. That is, that the center cannot hold. The center is not a position. The center doesn't stand for anything. The center must fold to the people who have an ideal, who stand for something, who believe in something, who want something. Now, they don't fold immediately. It can take decades for the center to fold. I mean, Ayn Rand talked about this in the 60s and 70s, that the moderates were nothing, and therefore the principled opposition on the radical sides would ultimately dictate the direction of any political party. And we're seeing that. I'm talking about Democrats now, but we'll see that with the Republicans as well. Exactly the same thing is happening and will only get worse. So it's not that Biden is not in charge. Biden is in charge, and he's trying to toe a kind of moderate line on some issues, like Israel. He towed the line. He kept to it. He didn't fold to the progressives. On economic issues, he's folded more. On some of the cultures issues, he's folded more. But not completely. This is not a nutty, progressive, way out there left socialist administration, but it's a far more leftist administration than what you would expect just from looking at Biden's record. It's far to the left of Biden. And that makes sense because the Democratic Party is far to the left of where it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. So the Democratic Party has drifted towards its most radical, to most extreme elements. The elements that are most consistent with its collectivism, most consistent with the altruism, most consistent with the statism that the Democratic Party has always stood for, but that is now much more consistently advocated for by kind of the far left within the party. And as much as people like Biden resist it, and I'd say even more so, what's her name from Arizona, Democratic senator from Arizona who's voted against the minimum wage and increases and other things. There are a few Democratic senators in particular who are trying to resist that, and we'll talk about why they're trying to resist it in a minute, partially because of ideology, but not only. But they can't hold. The center cannot hold. They have nothing to stand on. They have no basis for their ideas. There's only one reason that they can somehow sustain themselves. Yeah, her name is Sinema from Arizona. And that reason is that what's happening in the Democratic Party is that the activists and that the left-leaning progressive politicians are way, 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 way to the left of the American people. That they cannot win on this platform. The more they go left, the more they go towards the collectivism, the racism, the socialism, the statism of AOC and the rest of the leftist agenda, the more they lose the American public. The majority of Americans are not significantly to the left of Biden. Biden won the presidency not because of his leftist agenda. He won the presidency because he was viewed as a moderate. And he won the presidency because people hated Trump so much. It was not an affirmation of AOC. Indeed, the Democrats did terribly in the House of Representatives and did a lot worse than expected, with the exception of Georgia, which I think Trump single-handedly lost for the Republicans. With the exception of Georgia, they did poorly in the Senate. The American people did not embrace the far-left agenda of the Democratic Party. They embraced a kind of centrist, stand-for-nothing agenda. And the only thing that gives these centrist politicians anything, any kind of say within the Democratic Party, is because the fact is they represent the majority of Democratic voters. Not the 1,000 Apple employees who wrote a letter to Tim Scott to make a statement about Israel, but the 149,000 people who didn't sign that letter, or let's say 60% of them who are probably Democrats, are not way out there on the left. So the Democratic Party as a party is drifting away from where Americans are. And of course, more importantly, it's drifting away from what America is. And I want to say a few things about what America is.
And to begin with, I wonder if I can ask you to capsulize. I know this is difficult. Can I ask you to capsulize your philosophy? What is Randism?
First of all, I do not call it Randism, and I don't like that name. I call it objectivism.
All right.
Meaning a philosophy based on objective reality. Now let me explain it as briefly as I can. First, my philosophy is based on the concept that reality exists as an objective absolute, that man's mind, reason, is his means of perceiving it, and that man needs a rational morality. I am primarily the creator of a new code of morality which has so far been believed impossible, namely a morality not based on faith.
On faith?
Not on faith, not on arbitrary whim, not on emotion, not on arbitrary edict, mystical or social, but on reason, a morality which can be proved by means of logic, which can be demonstrated to be true and necessary.
All right. All right.
Now, may I define what my morality is?
All right.
Because this is merely an introduction. My morality is based on man's life as a standard of value. And since man's mind is his basic means of survival, I hold that if man wants to live on Earth and to live as a human being, he has to hold reason as an absolute, by which I mean that he has to hold reason as his only guide to action, and that he must live by the independent judgment of his own mind, that his highest moral purpose is the achievement of his own happiness, and that he must not force other people nor accept their right to force him, that each man must live as an end in himself and follow his own rational self-interest.
May I?
All right, before we go on, reminder, please like the show. We've got 163 live listeners right now, 30 likes. That should be at least 100. I figure at least 100 of you actually like the show. Maybe there are like 60 of the Matthews out there who hate it. But at least the people who are liking it, you know, I want to see a thumbs up. There you go. Start liking it. I want to see that go to 100. All it takes is a click of a thing, whether you're looking at this. And you know, the likes matter. It's not an issue of my ego. It's an issue of the algorithm. The more you like something, the more the algorithm likes it. So, and if you don't like the show, give it a thumbs down. Let's see your actual views being reflected in the likes. But if you like it, don't just sit there. Help get the show promoted. Of course, you should also share, and you can support the show at JaronBrooksShow.com/support, or on Patreon or Subscribestar or Locals, and show your support for the work, for the value hopefully you're receiving from this. And of course, don't forget, if you're not a subscriber, even if you just come here to troll, or even if you're here like Matthew to defend Marx, then you should subscribe, because that way you'll know when to show up. You'll know what shows are on, when they're on. You'll get notified, right? So, yes, like, share, subscribe, support. Like, share, subscribe, support. There you go. Easy. Do one or all of those, please.